Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSWITCH Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSWITCH open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSWITCH advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE. Hi, everybody, and welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is February 27th, and we are joined by Andrew Keil, the founder of Visytel. So before we go straight into that presentation, I'm just going to give you a few announcements. So do not forget to join our ClueCon Slack community. You can find that at signawire.community. We have a couple different channels on there for SignaWire and FreeSWITCH questions, as well as our own ClueCon channel. So if you're thinking about going to ClueCon, are for sure going to ClueCon, or wish you could go to ClueCon, that is the perfect channel to join. We talk about all different kinds of things in there. Also for ClueCon, again, the call for speakers is currently open. That will be open for about a month and a half longer, so don't forget to submit at ClueCon.com. We really want to hear you speak this year, so please don't forget. We always have a lot of great presentations, and if you need any inspiration, we have all of our presentations from last year on a playlist on our YouTube channel, and you're already on it, so why not check it out? Also this year, we are offering 2 special new ClueCon tickets. We are offering a brand new Coder Games ticket that is $99 if you are only going to that Monday. So if you're going to all of ClueCon, you can of course join us for the Coder Games, no extra cost. But if you want to attend, or you know someone who wants to attend only on Monday, they can do that now and have a special Coder Games ticket. We're also offering a friends and family ticket for $250, so check that out. We are also having a FreeSWITCH virtual training coming up on March 14th. So if you or your team is interested in basic FreeSWITCH training, you can learn more about that at freeswitch.com. And a quick shout out to our sponsor, SignaWire. They are offering you guys $50 in credit if you use the code CCWeekly19, all caps. CCWeekly19 for $50 in credit to play around. You can sign up for your SignaWire space at signawire.com, and that $50 lasts a long time. So I would definitely go and try that out and play around, and let us know what you think in our SignaWire Slack channel. All right, that is all the announcements I have for today, so we can get right into the presentations. So what do you have for us today, Andrew?
All right, so yeah, basically what I'd like to cover off today is just a bit of background on me and the target market that I'm working in, which is slightly different to other telecoms market sectors, but certainly one that's that I've been working in for many years. Just cover what the platform is. Obviously, FreeSWITCH is a very important part of it. And then the features that I've added, which is to do with service scheduling, some Lua modules to extend FreeSWITCH to make it a little easier and faster to code services, and the reasoning behind that. Logging, alerting, all the good things, SQL's side as well. Queuing, and not to leave it too late, but the most recent thing that I've worked with is credit card processing using FreeSWITCH and PCI compliance and what that's entailed. So, and a bit of a roadmap going forward. So that's the basic topics, and skipping right in. My background, 25 years and probably more than that now. I've been working in telecom since I left uni, basically. I started in voicemail, auto attendant systems, old analog systems, and then moved in to work for a service provider, which was called Legion, which is a European primarily based service provider. and then eventually set up my own business in the UK and brought it to Australia and be based it as Visytel. And so essentially the background's very varied, but I've covered everything from working with hardware, even getting the first approval for Aculab for their ISDN card in Australia way back, all the way to today, obviously working with FreeSWITCH and adding and extending that. So it's a impressive background. I've enjoyed the telecoms sector and I'll continue to enjoy it. It's a nice niche area of the computing industry, and I'll keep sticking to it.
So how do you use FreeSWITCH in your network?
I'll show you that on the next slide, basically how it sits and so forth. But I should say that the market is quite important as to why I've designed the platform and to work the way my clients need it to work. Because the industry, the service provider industry, is really, it's a mass calling industry. It sits in between the telco and, of course, TV, radio, and print. And unlike a normal call center or just be it a smaller service that may be offered, essentially you're relying on large or high density calls that are burst calls, and it's as equivalent, I'd say, to the banking industry in the sense of throughput and what you actually have to achieve. So there's a lot of work goes in, which is why I certainly appreciate FreeSWITCH, because it's all written in C, which is my preferred programming language. So you can actually get that sort of performance, and that's mainly why I chose FreeSWITCH. So, but the other part of this industry is the way the services actually work. A lot of services have to be delivered very quickly. So the BBC or a TV station may want something offered tomorrow, not in a month's time. And they also may want something offered that's a very short production run, so it only runs for one evening. So essentially, you have to be able to roll out a service, be it it may be a donation service if there's an emergency happens in the world and people want to donate money, for example, then essentially you've got to it's got to be live, it's got to be working, and it's got to handle the level of traffic that the TV can offer. So that's that style of industry that I work in, which is fun, high pressure but good fun. The other part of it is the way my clients work, which is all the service providers are set up as large marketing account management companies dealing with TV stations and so on and so forth. And there's a tiny technical team. That's just the way it works. So it also means that they do rely on external consultants like myself to fulfill the needs of getting the infrastructure in place so that their technical team can really just roll out services as quick as possible. So change audio, do that part. So it's a different structure. It's not like a normal company where there may be more resources for technical teams. It's generally very small. They don't want to spend money on tech. They want to spend money on new campaigns and so on and so forth, which is fair. That's just the market I'm in. And then the last 2 points are fairly obvious, that the platform has to handle high traffic loads and also be flexible and scale well. So this is where we get to the nice picture of the platform itself. And the platform, the way I've designed it is based on the slide before, where I essentially all my clients need the ability to roll out services very, very quickly, change services quickly, and not have to think or be C programmers, that's for sure. That's my job, not theirs. So essentially, the platform itself had to go through compliance. So I actually FreeSWITCH gained BT's wholesale SIP network certification. I think that was the first time it was done for an open source product in the UK. And I'm not so sure if any other open source product is certified with BT, but at the moment that was done about 4 years ago when they originally started, or we originally started to move to FreeSWITCH. And then once that was compliance, essentially you've got your operating system layer. At the moment it's running Windows Server 2016, but it's slated to go to 2019 mid this year. That doesn't really affect running FreeSWITCH. FreeSWITCH sits at version 1.8.4, I think, or 3 or 4. It's about to go to 8.5 once I recompile again. So essentially it's the latest version of FreeSWITCH, and that's obviously doing the communication through SIP, as you all well know, and does the playback of audio, recording audio, and those components are all sitting inside FreeSWITCH. What I have done though is I've broken out some parts that I haven't relied on FreeSWITCH to do for me. So, and that's the part separated across where the event socket layer little arrow is. So you've got things like logging, alerting, CDRs, queue management, and the SQL side. I've split all that out because essentially I had all of that code already pre-done. I had it all pre-tested with other products. So there was no point reinventing and retesting and reusing what's in FreeSWITCH when it can be done externally, and that's what I've focused on. And that was the quickest solution to get up and running for my clients, so because they were used to those products. And then above that, I've slotted in some FreeSWITCH modules in C, which I guess you could say are proprietary. But one of them is service scheduling to enable scheduling services the way that my clients work, which is point-in-time scheduling and so on and so forth, and I'll speak more about that. And the other module, which is only 4 months old, is the module to communicate to credit card clearing houses, so Stripe being the primary clearing house that my clients worked with. And that's been done and is live in production at the moment. So that's sitting there. And then above that, we move through the features that have been added. So there's Lua modules. If you're not aware, the Lua language lets you create a module beneath the script itself that you can call upon to simplify writing services as such. So what I've done is I've hidden all the FreeSWITCH stream file, etc., and so on commands inside a module, and then I've exposed a command like voc play or something like that to play an audio file to make it simpler for developers to actually write services quickly, and that's the primary focus of that. The other part of this Lua modules is a service launcher, so that every call that comes into FreeSWITCH goes through a Lua module that decides, based on the service schedule, what service to run, what Lua script for that matter, and that then kicks off the script and off it runs. So basically that's how that part works. And then there's two facets above, the actual parts that my client works with daily. One is a template to write Lua scripts in, which is quite simple, and I'll go through that. And there's also a call flow, which is actually also in Lua, but again, a simplified version of writing a service with a simple flow of commands. If it's a basic service that just plays audio, collects a PIN number and says goodbye or something like that. So it's quite simple, and they use that for generic services. The other part of this all has been flood tested with BT's involvement as well. And we've reached essentially 1,000 plus concurrent calls per server at about 33 call attempts per second, which is very impressive with this design. And so the client is happy, BT are very happy, and especially because at the moment we're only running 2 boxes. Each box can do 1,000 calls, and it obviously can extend from there if they extend more FreeSWITCH boxes as such. So that's the current layout. I'm communicating with SQL Server mainly because my client already has an existing SQL Server infrastructure. So that's the reason SQL Server was chosen. It's also why Windows, in a way, was chosen, because obviously the ODBC side seems to work better under Windows. Let's not say too much about that, but yeah. So that's the current layout. It'll make more sense when you actually see as we go forward the actual way the services are created and so on and so forth. So I'll skip forward. Service scheduling is one part which is critical to any service provider. Basically, we need to get, or they need to get services out as fast as possible. So essentially, what it does is based on the DDI, or for Americans, the DID. Essentially, the call comes in and a decision is made based on a certain task. And this is actually very common in the service bureau industry. You either play an audio file and hang up on a caller because you want to say, sorry, this service is offline, or please call again, etc. and so on. So that service actually doesn't even use a Lua script at all. They just put in an audio file to play, and that's it. And this is quite common when services go on and offline regularly. Start service obviously starts the Lua script, which we'll talk about. Chain is just for testing, so essentially a developer calls in and just types in the phone number of the service and it chains to that service. Also, quite a nice feature if you're chaining between different services. So, and reject is just reject the caller, just hang up on the caller, which is not nice, but some services, the lines have to be officially cut off with no answer. So those are the 4 tasks. It's all done in a SQL database at that point. Those things are all set up by the client. On the FreeSWITCH side, you might recognize the normal dial plan side. Essentially, all the dial plan's doing is pointing any inbound 11-digit number to start launch.luc, which is a Lua compiled script or object. So essentially it just starts launch, and launch decides what service to run, and then it starts the service. So actually the guys, my clients, actually never touch any dial plans, any XML at all, which is possibly a nice thing for them. But so they essentially just fill in a database, and that gets exported to the IVR and read into memory, so that there's no database interaction into the call landing on the IVR. The other feature of the scheduling is its point-in-time scheduling. So essentially, each row of the database has a date time on it. If that date time has been reached, or there's something into the future, then it will do the next row, if that makes sense. So it's not a start and finish time, it's just based on point in time. So you're saying, right, row 1 has got this date, so it's live at the moment. Row 2 has a date into the future, so that needs to be loaded onto the IVR as well. If that date's reached, then run that service. So they can simply stack up services to run, so that they don't have to be doing this manually over the weekend, etc. and so on. So that's quite a nice feature. The other part is obviously the call flow is supported within this scheduling table. And that call flow I'll talk about again when we actually start looking at the typing in code, etc. So, and there's no FreeSWITCH reload XML command because it doesn't actually use the inherent or inbuilt XML side of FreeSWITCH. services, etc. So that stays the same. So it's quite a nice scheduling mechanism. It works for my client. I'm looking to extend it a bit further, make it a little bit more flexible than what it currently is. But for what they're doing, it's quick, it's simple, and my clients find it really easy to work with. They don't have to understand regex, for example, and things like that, which is also a good thing when there's a small technical resource. So the Lua modules, this is the part that I'd like to demonstrate and sort of show off what's being done. The important part about this is it's trying to target speed of service creation and writing services. Obviously, I chose Lua. It was the logical choice, especially a few years back. I've read quite a few things that Anthony Minasales said about Lua and how fast it is and so on and so forth. It was a logical choice of language. It was easy to extend, and using modules, it becomes very powerful. In fact, it's one of my favorite languages now, using different for coding services in, that's for sure. So that's why I chose Lua. And then what I did is I built a core Lua module, which I talked about earlier, and some extra modules to add to that and to add various things and expose it up to the programmer. Then I created a template for service creation, which I'll show you, and then added the call flow and so on and so forth. The code editor I chose was Visual Studio Code, which has become very popular as far as I can see throughout the world. So I've been using that for a while now, and it allows you to add what they call user snippets, which means you can actually sort of essentially start typing code and it'll fill it in for you, and I'll show you how that works, which is really nice. And I've also obviously produced PDF documentation of all the modules that I've added, so that my clients can also reference that if they want. They've got the choice of using the coding, commenting, or just look at PDFs. So let me delve in. Just hold on a minute. So inside Visual Studio Code, essentially with a fresh Lua text file, essentially, my client just types VC template and hits enter, and they instantly get the template for them to write services in. So what I've done is I've put together the least amount of code in the template. I know there's a lot of comments. That's just to help my client understand what's what. But my aim was to make the code inside the Lua script as small as possible. That way, when it comes to producing 50, 100, 150 services, then if there needs to be a change, essentially the changes are done in the module level, not at the service level. And this is an important thing. Again, all my clients produce hundreds of different services. And with hundreds of services, it becomes difficult to just do a mass change, as you'd probably understand. And this was also even worse when they were using a graphical language. That was almost impossible. You had to do it manually. So that's where the reasoning behind making a template that they write their services in stood out. So, and then the service notes section, obviously you just say, I test service, and there's various features which you can turn on and off. Call flow, switching, credit card, and Spoke is a unique one for my client in the UK, Spoke Interactive. So and that can be turned on or off depending on what features you want, which is also quite nice because it reduces the load on the IVR if you don't need the switching layer, etc. And then it just pulls in my core module. The client doesn't have to touch any of that if need be. And then there's three parts to a call, which I'm sure you're probably all aware of. There's a part of the call which is prior to answer, which I call pre-answer. The call is answered. Then there's the main service, which is obviously when the call has been answered and you want to interact with the caller. And then there's the last part, which is cleanup, which is basically when the caller has hung up. So that there's three distinct spots where the developer can actually add code to. And that's the way it's been for quite a while as to how my clients write services. They always have three parts to code. 90% of their coding, though, is in the main service, which is where they'd play audio, they'd record audio and interact with the caller. So obviously that's where most of the code actually goes. And then, of course, at the bottom, there's hang-up handlers and so on. A lot of this cannot be done any other way. It's just the way it is. So I've obviously put some sections which can't be changed or shouldn't be changed inside the template. So then the way it works is pretty much if you want a service running and you want to play some audio, you just type vc dot. In the case of voice files, you say voc and voc play, for example, and you type in intro.wav. And that would play file intro.wav in the program audio path, which is default and set up in the service scheduling part. So it automatically picks that. You can put a full path in, but obviously the aim is not to use full paths, again, because that makes it locked to that particular system, and we don't particularly want that. So, and then you can type other things. If you want to do logging, you can just do vc log info, and that does a log message in FreeSWITCH, which you'd be aware of, like debug or info logs. Say whatever you'd like. But the other part I've done is I've added the ability to do a commented version so you can actually see what each function can do. So if I go DTMF get, then I know this looks complicated, but what I've done there is I've pulled back the full commented version of the function. And this function will actually run. It's correctly commented. And shows the power of what you can do with the module side of Lua, where essentially you can have a different parameters table, results table, etc., coming out of this, and set up various variables, and that includes timeouts and minimum, maximum collection of DTMF digits, and so on and so forth. This is the way. I guess my client needs a lot of flexibility when it comes to capturing DTMF. It's the stuff they do every day. So that's where having the flexibility of different ways of handling DTMF. I found the default in FreeSWITCH was fairly basic, to say the least. So you kind of had to extend that and work around that to get all the features that are really needed quite regularly, actually, for my client. And that includes having the ability to have verify functions, so you can actually verify a PIN and so on and so forth. And other parts is, various different interrupt prompts and so on and so forth. So that's where this goes from there. And then what I've also done is added variables to make it easier for the developer. So if I go vc.varlist, I don't type this every day, but basically I've added variables starting with v underscore to keep it sort of separate from the FreeSWITCH channel variables. Just to again make it easier, so v underscore 2 is the v number or DDI or DOD, whatever you'd like to call it, out to from is the CLI, SIP call ID is fairly obvious, the session ID is the UUID, and so on. The only reason of doing this is really just to keep it straightforward for them to see what's what. And of course, I've added various things, all the service scheduling or service timetables, it's also called, things like the parameters you can pass in and use that in your service as well, and so on. So those are the fields that they use, and they can be used within any part of the system. So you can just use a percentage v_2, for example. Oops. And that would automatically be transcribed into the actual text as such. Also, if you want to collect the variable at any time, you can just create a variable in Lua and just say vc.var get. Just put in the variable you want to collect and it will put it into that variable and you can use it in your service. So it's very quick, it's simple. And the other part that I find really nice is as soon as my client requests a change to how, say, DTMF is handled and so forth, they don't have to change all their services. Basically, I'll make a change to the module. That module can be loaded and it sits, just bear with me, sits as an object code version of Lua. So essentially that module is loaded onto the FreeSWITCH box and it's live instantly. There's no restarting FreeSWITCH. There's no recompiling anything. Essentially they get the new feature as soon as it's rolled out to the actual FreeSWITCH box as such. So that's that part, and that's where this approach is really quite nice for my clients and such. The other part of this obviously is the SQL side and the switching side, and I'll just touch on this and go back to my slides. But if I just pull up a sample SQL, essentially again, I've made use of all the nice features Lua offers and the way it handles variables, etc. And so you can actually write some SQL, manipulate the SQL, including searching by, you can actually check the column types, and you can also search on the actual, just pull back one column at a time. Doesn't matter if you're doing a select star, for example. And it's essentially you just write SQL. You can write anything you like and use stored procedures as well. And that part is offloaded to my service to talk to SQL Server. So on that side, the service continues to run. If there's any errors in SQL, it's fed back and the service doesn't crash, FreeSWITCH doesn't crash, there's no issues. It just basically keeps on going and just times out and comes back with an error, and you can handle it within your actual service script. And then the last side is switching, queuing, etc. Let's a little bit. And the switching is very similar. It's not the same as how FreeSWITCH does its queuing, but similar in a way. You basically add to a queue, and the call is put in that queue. In this case, it's a direct queue, so it's a direct call straight out. And I'm actually, this is one part I did enjoy working with, is the conferencing part. When I do all the switching that I've added in the sense of the management and the SQL side separate to FreeSWITCH, when it comes to actually joining the two calls together, so there's an inbound leg and an outbound leg, then I actually make use of the FreeSWITCH conferencing features to join the two together, which gives me a lot of flexibility with that conversation. Obviously, you can record the conference, which is excellent, and all the other features that conferencing gives you. So that's what I've made use of, and that's definitely a big plus and that part works very well. The last part I'll just touch on is writing call flow scripts, which obviously you wouldn't normally do in a template approach. You'd actually do it in the database and it would just run. What it looks like is essentially a shortened version of the features or the functions that I've shown earlier. So essentially it becomes a script that is just one long string, but it does what my client requires. So, for example, use this. So essentially, it becomes just a long string. Again, it's Lua code. It's just got semicolons, so you can actually have it across one string. You could happily run it one line at a time. That would work as well. And what that's doing is enabling them to quickly write a mini service that doesn't involve a full Lua script. It just actually runs directly from the service itself. So that's the shortened abbreviation or the call flow version, I guess. On that side. So let me just go back to. Oh, and the PDF documentation, I should just point out, it's that looks like. So every function's been documented, SQL functions. There's no actual FreeSWITCH core or FreeSWITCH function called directly. It's all done through a module, and there's no speed problems with that. Obviously, it's just essentially just transposing what the call is in some cases, but essentially that's the reason behind that again is in case you guys want to change how FreeSWITCH does something, I can adjust the module and my client doesn't have to rewrite all these services. So that's the reasoning behind that approach. Okay. Logging and alerting. I'll just touch on this. Essentially what I've done is the FreeSWITCH logs are still there, the standard log in the FreeSWITCH log directory. But my client also wanted logging done slightly differently. So what I've added is the ability to have day-based and down to the hour-based logs due to the traffic and the amount of traffic on the system. It makes it a lot easier to just split it into day and hour logs. Also, I also pull out the individual call session or the UUID for the call, and that gets separated out into its own log file based on that call session ID or UUID. That's very handy because then essentially if a customer of my client queries a particular call and they marry it up to the session ID and say, oh, this is the call, we can actually grab the log straight away as to what happened to that call and not bother searching through masses amount of logs. The other nice feature is CLI logging. Essentially what also happens is the development team, their CLIs are listed on the system, so that when they make a call to FreeSWITCH, what happens is there's a log collected just for their phone number. So anything they do is logged, so every call they make, so they can do a nice tail command on that log and pull back what's happening just with their phone calls, which is a very nice feature, and the guys use this every day essentially for testing. And this also applies to outbound calls, where essentially if there's an outbound call on FreeSWITCH that calls one of the developers' teams phone numbers, then that is also logged to this same log file on its own, and then essentially they can search through just their calls and what's happening on the system. There's daily errors and warning logs, nothing special there, but I've separated them out so it's, again, quick to find out what's happened. Everything's auto-archived, and there's emailing of any errors on the system goes to the development team and to myself, for that matter. And the nice part about that is again, this log of just the phone call is attached to the email, which means, again, debugging is so quick and so easy because you can actually see what the caller did. And lastly, there's summary reports on that. So I'll just have a look and show you what one of the logs looks like. So the log itself is taken similar to what the FreeSWITCH log is. It's got some more information where you've got the to and from, what the phone numbers are. And then if you scroll to the right, just bear with me, sorry, you get further information about what actually happened on the call. And so that becomes quite easy then for the person to debug, the developers to debug what actually happened. All these functions are quite clear. You can see the actual call function, what's actually being called. In this case, SQL's being called and what's been happening and so on and so forth. So, and they can debug that to go. SQL side, again, there was a reliance to work with SQL Server. That was another reason why my client worked, or we actually chose FreeSWITCH running under Windows. I separated the ODBC side out, and therefore, obviously, the service just keeps running if SQL's down. My service actually looks after the connectivity. There's nothing in FreeSWITCH touching SQL Server at all. So any connectivity reconnection is done with my service, and that includes, obviously it's a multi-threaded service, so to handle the amount of traffic and to get the numbers of 1,000 plus concurrent calls. And that's been optimized down to the point of even optimizing and splitting out cursor queries like select queries versus non-cursor queries like insert, updates, etc., where there's actually no cursor held open. So there's been a lot of work to get the performance out of that, and a lot of tweaking. But the good part is I've been able to do that, and my client's happy it's working, and it's been in production now for years. That part, that's the first part that really was heavily tested. The other part that happens is the ODBC error message is exposed all the way back to FreeSWITCH. So in other words, if there is an error with a query, you get the full text string that's provided inside from SQL Server inside ODBC to say what actually happened inside the SQL. That's quite a nice feature because, of course, then you can fix it. Most likely you were using a field that doesn't exist, etc. CDRs are also offloaded. I don't use the FreeSWITCH CDRs side. That's done using the call event, so from the point of answer to the point of disconnect, so that the service itself doesn't really matter what the service gets up to. Every call, even if it's using, well, any call that hits FreeSWITCH will be handled by this mechanism. And it'll be inserted to SQL, and it also handles if SQL is down, and it'll insert any missed rows should SQL come back up, etc., and so on. So CDRs are done that way. Again, I just find that if I leave FreeSWITCH to do what it does best, which is certainly handles phone calls, then I get the best performance out of FreeSWITCH, and I'm not having to look into somebody else's code, I guess, and try to understand why it was done this way versus that way. So again, I had this layer part built before I moved to FreeSWITCH, so there was no reason to sort of suddenly sort of shelve that and not complete the work. So that's how the SQL layer was done. Queuing. The queuing product is the oldest product in my arsenal of products. I've been designing and working with queuing and call center style products for so long. It's a bit scary since I started back in even doing the installing voicemail systems and so on and so forth. So that product was developed to the point where the actual design of it was used by Telenor in Norway, and at the time, which was probably 5 or 6 years ago now, it was the largest virtual call center in Scandinavia, and it was also a virtual switchboard platform. Because it was sitting at the telco level, you could actually have companies just offload the entire telephony parts outside their company. So I've taken that, I've extended that further and so on and so forth, and that's what's running now at my client's site. So the queuing is a little bit different on that side, and I couldn't make use of FreeSWITCH's internal queue system because I would have had to have extended that as well, and then you're creating more work. So on that side, a lot of the features are the same. That's not saying there isn't similar features. I guess it's just my client's already got all the back ends working with the table structure that they're used to, and that's why the queue features are done that way. And all the nice things like call me back, call bookings are in there, call recordings is obviously done, like I said earlier, with the FreeSWITCH conferencing. Switchboard functionality is in there, and call reporting, etc. But the part that's probably the most interesting, and I wanted to get to as quickly as possible, is the credit card side. This is a part that my client has been wanting to have inside their product for many years. They're forever doing donation campaigns, charity campaigns, and so on with TV stations and the like. And they wanted to offer the ability to handle the credit card over the phone using DTMF. So essentially, I worked with them for about 2 or so months to come up with the design, while they spent probably 4 months working through PCI compliance. So because of the nature of credit card processing and PCI compliance, what's happened is the PCI compliance is obviously held by my client in the UK, which is Spoke Interactive. That's based on their infrastructure, their setup, their firewalls, all the things that go with PCI compliance. But the good news is, obviously, the FreeSWITCH, the diagram I showed you on one of the earlier slides, that product is the product that's running within the PCI compliance environment, if you can put it that way. And then essentially the connectivity was made to Stripe, and for the case of donation services, also BT MyDonate is supported, and really it's so flexible. Any clearinghouse that has a mechanism that you can communicate over the internet to, then it can be supported as it's very flexible implementation. So I created a module in C to do this, obviously handling the DTMF. Security purposes, the credit card number is encrypted in memory while it's in memory. obviously makes use of TLS 1.2 or later when you have to communicate with Stripe, etc. And I had to make a few small modifications to FreeSWITCH. It wasn't that hard to do. To hide the DTMF, obviously you can't log the DTMF at the point of credit card entry and so on and so forth for PCI compliant reasons. So the product itself met the requirements that they needed and PCI compliance needed. And then the features that it gave them was online processing, so you can actually do a credit card transaction. It can even tell you if it was successful on the phone, or offline processing, which is the approach they've taken for most of the donation services, where essentially the details are taken and it's processed later. Obviously, the results are positive or negative depending on the card number entered and so on. And it retries should there be an outage with Stripe and so on, with various delays in there. So, and that went live again, a TV campaign over 1-2 hour period. Made a good sum of money, 765,000 British pounds. And that the interesting part about this was that they had 4 models to collect money for this donation service. They had the IVR solution, obviously. They had a mobile solution, which was basically an SMS where you text what you want to pay, and it's charged to the mobile provider's bill. They had an online solution, which was just over the internet. They had a call center solution, which was obviously real people taking details off the caller. That was done through a separate company. And the fascinating part was the IVR solution actually was the second highest revenue part of this sum of money after the mobile SMS, which shocked me. I thought people would be using online or as such a lot more than the IVR, but I think it's because it's the simplicity of just entering your credit card number, expiry date, and CVC number. It was quick, it was simple to the caller, and they obviously enjoyed the revenue it raised. So the other part is people tended to donate more money on the phone than they did by texting in, help 10 or help 20 for £20, etc., and so on. So there was actually a flexible amount of money that they could donate, and they averaged, like it says here, £26 roughly on per donation, which was also impressive. So on that side, they're obviously lining up different charities to use this service, and that at the moment is growing for their business. And they're also looking at using credit card processing for existing services now that it's actually live. And future roadmap, what I'm hoping to do is work a bit with SignalWire on the speech and TTS side and bring that to my clients as such. I'm quite impressed with the quality of the text-to-speech. I haven't used the speech recognition, but the text-to-speech in SignalWire is quite good. So I'd like to sort of start to bring the integration from my product across to SignalWire for those facets, and so that's certainly high on my agenda. I've still got my test account, so I'll be using that soon. And also try to bring some of my modules a little bit more cross-platform. At the moment, it's Windows only for the add-on modules, but it's all written in C. It's not hard for me to bring it to Linux as well. It's just the speed to get these out the door. Obviously, any requests from existing and new clients, I'd be happy to satisfy. And yeah, any ideas are welcome. So that's basically my presentation for today.
Wow, that was wonderful, Andrew. Thank you so much. I'm so impressed. I mean, I loved the demo that you showed, and it's just so simple and so clean, and the comments that you have in there, it's wonderful. I do have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
My first one is, does your solution also run in the cloud?
Yes, it does. Currently, all my development and system is running on Azure on a Windows Server 2016 core, 2019 core installation actually. So I'm sort of preparing that for my client to use the same style of setup. So that's been running now for 8 months in the cloud at the moment. So and I also actually use it for my home alarm system as well to prove that it actually works. I've rigged up my my home alarm, which is used to call an alarm company through an analog phone line, which is probably similar to what's done in the States as well. And so I changed that to a SIP from analog to SIP quite easily, and then I shipped the call across to Azure. And FreeSWITCH handles that. It's a nice little Lua script, and then contacts sends me an email message, my wife an email message when the alarm's set, and so on and so forth. So, and when it goes off, it tells you which location it's gone off, etc., and so on. And then you can log in and see your cameras if you've got cameras or whatever you need. So.
That's
all
awesome.
Good fun.
That sounds great. Yeah, you have a lot of really nice features, and I'm just so impressed with all of it. Can I also ask? This is a more of a, I guess, question for you. What, if there is anything, would you like to see or do differently in the future of Visytel?
Well, I'd like to take. I'd like to expand logically and get some employees as such locally to help with the development. The load has been quite heavy, but I've tried to steer away from the web side or doing web designs and so on, because that just costs so much time for a single developer. Anything graphical is very costly to a single developer. So on that side, I've focused solely on the lower level code, and so the C modules and writing in C. Obviously, no one sees that; it just has to work, which is good. And the Lua side, as you've probably seen, I've tried to just take it to the level that my client needs. I haven't over-engineered it or spent too much time on that. So those are the levels I've taken it to. The next stage is to, like I said, try to integrate a bit better with the FreeSWITCH community now that it's working, it's in production and has been for years now, but parts are more recent. So and bring the modules a bit more into the mainstream. Some of these features I'm sort of happy to share. The CLI, for example, logging is a really nice feature for companies to use. That's being used heavily. And just the approach, like I said, is a bit different because it's a mass calling market. They have very short-term services, but yeah, definitely just try to expand and meet all you guys at ClueCon, not this year, but next year, hopefully. So.
We'd love to have you. We love having you here. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming in and teaching us all something new. We love that. Yes. So thanks for coming on. And I'm going to throw it back to Josh here for our closeout. So thank you again, Andrew.
Yep.
All right, well, that'll bring it to a close this week. We definitely appreciate you coming in, Andrew, and sharing your slides there and basically giving us a run-through on what you have going on there on your side of the ocean there. And for the rest of the viewing audience, do stand by. Next week, we will have Dan Jenkins with Nimble Ape, who will be basically showing us what he's been up to as of late. And so with that, we will bring the episode to a close. You guys have yourself a great rest of your week.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at FreeSWITCH.com.